Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mind Matters with Kay. Today, we are talking about emotional intelligence with Brandon Harrison, aka B Love.
Be
Like,
love.
no. I like it though. It fits you. Um, but what's up, Brandon? What's going on?
Nothing. All good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. I want to take the opportunity to thank you for being a guest. I actually thought you would be the perfect guest to speak about emotional intelligence. Number one, because you are very well spoken. Number two, you have the ability to articulate in a way that people can understand when certain situations aren't really going the way that they need them to and or able to understand. And thirdly, this is what you didn't know. So when I was going through my storm, there were times I would talk to you about certain subjects matter loosely, right?
Mhm.
But they applied to me, and you were able to help because during that time my mind was transitioning, right? I was
Right,
learning emotional intelligence. I didn't know what it was though, but I just knew my mind was shifting. But talking to you, we worked together for 6 years, a little over six
right,
years
right.
so I would talk to you about certain things and just the way that you will be able to repeat what I said, but give me advice in the same sense. Like that's why your name Be Love or Be Smooth. Like you was good. So
Well, I'm always trying to help.
yeah, you do. You do a good job at it. You do a good job at it.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
No problem. So I'm gonna give you the floor. If you want to tell us what emotional intelligence is.
Um, so most of emotional intelligence is a wide range of things. I think, specifically regards to mental health, I think is more so um, I know a mental awareness for yourself. And
Right.
in that mental awareness for yourself, guiding you through your emotions, you can then empathize with other people and try to help them navigate their lives as well. I think that's the basis of what emotional intelligence is. Developing it can be a little tricky if you've never had to experience that, but um, overall, I think that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about emotional intelligence, and then navigating those emotions to then understand them.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that sometimes I think some people are just born with it, right? The ability to empathize, the ability to feel other people's pains, showing sensibility toward other people's emotions and things of that
Right.
nature. So some people are born with it, right?
Yeah, some
I
people can be. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So some people do are born with the emotional intelligence. We just call them aware or highly intelligent, but really it's emotional intelligence. They just are born with that.
Right.
Some people, such as myself, had to go through some things to develop the emotional intelligence because I didn't have it. I had some of it, but it's nowhere near where I am today, right?
Right.
So, outside of being born with it or going through situations that make you become wise, do you have other expectations or how do people develop it outside of those two examples?
Um, there's several different ways I think you can help yourself develop it. And the easiest way is really
Mhm.
to looking inward, right? Like asking yourself questions. I think most people go through some things and they're more reactive to it than actually trying to understand it. So when you have that and when you're going through something, it is a lot more difficult, especially if you're not used to that, to try to navigate those emotions by asking yourself kind of like pivotal questions of why am I experiencing what I'm experiencing right now, especially because everybody's going through something at any given moment every single day. So if you have a coworker that's at work that's really bothering you, you really don't know why, right? There's not and something you can pinpoint. Asking yourself, all right, what am I experiencing in this moment? How can I navigate this moment? Will kind of give you an understanding of what it is about that person or yourself that you may be struggling with for that emotional reaction that you're having in that moment. So just like searching inward is the best way. And there's ways around that and like how you can do that. Like my biggest thing is journaling, right? Like I journal, I'm a very big, heavy journaler. And usually those stem from just talking out whatever I'm feeling at any given moment. So at the end of the day, most days I don't do it every day. I used to do it every day, but most days I'll go through my entire day of what I was feeling at this point, what I was doing at this point, how that make me feel at this point. So it helps you navigate those emotional and mental thoughts that you're having to determine, what it may be that you're feeling in those experiences that you're having.
That is a very, very, very awesome way of putting it. But I do have a question. Did you have any connection issues? Did you hear yourself? Like, were you still talking, or was it like breaking up?
I was still talking. You were going a little blank there for a second.
Okay, as long as we can capture what you said, because for some reason, when I have certain interviews, the enemy likes to start playing with my internet connection.
Nice.
That's why.
Yeah, we're gonna let them win in that,
because you did just give us a whole host of information, and basically, I just want to make sure my viewers can hear everything you said.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so everything was kind of clear on my end, but like I said, you did break up on your end a little bit.
Okay, I'm fine because I wasn't the one speaking, so it's all good. Can you just check your internet connection real quick just to make sure it's not? I'm sure it's mine, but just for shits and giggles.
Yeah, I'm still up, but that doesn't mean it's not running slow or anything.
Right. I'm gonna have to do something about this internet, but that's another story. Anyway, so I think that well, I'm not going to talk about what I think. I'm gonna ask you. So, do you think that because people are products of their environments, do you think that sometimes emotional intelligence is a learned behavior, or is it kind of like cast on you in a sense, depending on like if you had a bad upbringing, a violent upbringing, you know what I mean? So like, do you think that occurs in that specific instance, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be a bit of both. Like for me, how I try to develop it is because of the field I'm in, right? Like I study psychology heavy. Like my version of psychology that I study is basically evolved around work psychology. So, but having to navigate emotional and both emotions and relationships are kind of what I like to focus in. So that's kind of where I got the term from. And then I started, just diving deep in it. But a lot of people can suffer through like traumatic events to where they really have no choice but to become that, because that's the only way they're going to be able to get out of it. It's just anybody that's going through depression or anxiety or things of that nature typically doesn't know where it starts from. And then if you're seeking professional help, that's kind of where they tend to go to help you navigate that. Like, what is going on within your own life? Can you articulate that? And a lot of times people can't. And that's when you become reactionary as opposed to like, all right, let me take a step back. So yeah, so like I think it's a bit of both in terms of like how a person can develop it and then the reasons why they develop it in the first place.
Yeah, see, the fact that you're a psychology major, like it gave me like 8 million questions in the matter of 2 seconds. But I will say, for me, when I went to therapy, I'm not ashamed that I went. I did go. I didn't attend for like a year or anything. I went for a few months, and her name was Jackie Thomas. Loved her. So sometimes, like on one of my other episodes, I spoke about people in therapy. Sometimes people go for a short duration. Sometimes people go relentlessly, depending on how much trauma or how much stuff you're trying to unpack, right?
Right.
So when I was going through what I was going through, I really couldn't identify. I had an idea, right? I had an idea, but I really couldn't get to the core. And when I was seeing Dr. Thomas, she started from my childhood.
Right. Yeah.
So when we started, because a lot of times certain traumatic situations you tend to cover and you don't even want to revisit that again.
Right.
But she made sure that I revisited that because that was to my core. Like she needed to get to the core so we can begin to, it was like an onion to start unpeeling.
Unpeeling. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when she would, like when we would discuss certain things, I was able to connect the dots. Like, oh shoot, that's why. Dang, that's crazy. It's kind of
Right.
like mind blowing in a sense. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So like, but once you become self-aware, it's easier to deploy emotional intelligence. I think the more you go through, it's easier to deploy emotional intelligence. And unfortunately, some people never get it.
Right.
Right. So like to those people, what do you think that stems from? Do you just think people aren't aware, they're not conscious of what they're putting out?
Yes. I mean, I think that's the biggest reason why it's not consciously developed. But like I said, like some people, it's kind of like a perspective shift, right? Kind of like you said earlier, like your whole perspective kind of shift once you were going through what you were going through, and sometimes that often happens, and then sometimes it happens in the reverse, right? To where somebody's going through something and they don't care about anything else, right? They're not developing anything else because they've been going through much, and then it's everybody else's fault because nothing they can do about it. But if you take that paradigm that you're already, you know, that you have something going on, and internally the only person you can control is yourself, how can I navigate that? You have to ask those questions. And most people, well, now I wouldn't say most people, but a lot of people just don't ask the questions. They don't seek the help, they don't ask the questions, and then they tend just to stick with whatever they know, and that's the trauma that they feel. Which something I actually thought about recently, like how trauma in itself is habitual, right? To where some people just, that's all they really know, so that's all they're willing to deal with. Like you see it a lot within like relationships where people just choose the wrong people constantly,
Right.
because they're constantly, that's what they're used to, right? That's all they've been through. They don't know anything better, so that's just what they stick with. It's kind of a comfortability that you have with the trauma that you developed, and nobody really wants to address those feelings. But to be able to develop that and explore that is hard. Like it's really hard to have to do, but once you get through that, it's a lot easier to maintain and then to build on.
Yeah. So if that's the case, so like, all right, well, maybe I want to say, like, are people just content with staying in their trauma or staying in a negative space, or are they not conscious of the fact that they're in a negative space?
Right. And I think it's a bit of both of that as well. Because like if you have people who know that, all right, there's something going on within myself that I need to get control of, they just never take that step. Right. And then you have some people that know there's something going on. And it's like, well, I just don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to about it. I don't know where to go about it. Like, and this is kind of perpetuates, especially in the Black community where psychology is a thing, right? Like getting help is a thing. And that's hard for us in the mainstream, but I think we're getting more adapted to it, to where we are seeking help. We are trying to figure out where we can navigate these this mental perspective that we have to help not only ourselves, but our future children and things of that sort. But just getting there it's been a process, but I think we are getting there.
I 100% agree with that. I recently, over the weekend, I spoke at a Rough Riders bike club. They had a suicide awareness ride. They had an event.
Oh, wow. Really?
And I got to speak. Yeah, it was awesome. Biker dudes, they're tough. So it's like,
right.
It was amazing to actually be a part of that and see so many Black and brown people. Again, I don't ever want people to think I'm making this a Black or white thing. That is not it, because it applies to everyone who has a pulse.
Right.
I'm just speaking about our community specifically because we were told for so long that it did not apply to us. And a lot of people continue to suffer because they couldn't address the things that was going on internally. So a lot of people committed suicide. A lot of people turned to substance abuse, alcohol abuse, to kind of quiet down the noise. Because one thing you can't do is escape your mind. That is what you 24/7.
Always with you. Yep.
Yeah. Right. So sometimes, because like you said, what you recently said, some people don't know where to begin. But all they know is that it's something in them that's triggering something, and they just kind of need to suppress it a bit. Yeah. But what people don't realize is, some of them do realize that you can smoke it away. I was one of them. Weed, that is, not nothing else. Be clear.
Specify. All right.
Gotta be specific.
Right.
Some people, heroin, opioids,
Yeah. Yeah.
alcohol. People become alcoholics, and it's because they're trying to suppress something that's so bothersome that they can't get. They don't know. They may not know where to get the help from.
Right.
And a lot of it too is genetics. I mentioned in my speech over the weekend that within the Black and brown communities, trauma is ingrained in our DNA
Yeah.
historically, from
Yes.
slavery and dysfunction, and we are products of our family, the
Right.
historical bloodline, right? So when you have DNA ingrained through your entire being, but the flip side of that is we're very resilient people.
Hmm.
So we are strong, but my goal is to redefine what strength looks like in current times. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to get help. I am pro therapy. I am pro medication because sometimes people have chemical imbalances. You know,
Definitely.
so like we have to begin, which is why I do this, because I want to paint a different picture. I want to create a safe space for people where they feel like it's okay to be not okay, because sometimes the issues that we're dealing with, it's not even our fault. It's something that
Yeah.
happened to us when we were younger,
Right.
and things that are traumatizing. Some people lose children, and as parents, I wouldn't want to know that pain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we can't really just judge and be like, oh, be strong, be strong. People have to be okay with being vulnerable. And within our community, we women, it's okay to not be strong. A strong Black woman, it's okay to be weak. Men, you are not a punk or a sissy or emasculated because you have feelings. We all have
Right.
feelings, right?
Yes.
And in order for you to become your most authentic self, you have to develop some form of emotional intelligence, because you have to start reflecting and being like, okay, this is not, maybe, because it'll trickle down into the relationships with your children, personal relationships. If your method of handling things is to either yell and fight them away or to just walk away and not deal with them, it affects the people you're around or the people that you're having the experience with.
Right. Yeah.
So
I don't think a lot of people understand that, especially that point, especially if you have kids, right? It's like you said, it's okay not to be okay, but it's also okay to be willing to delve deep into your emotional state to determine what that is. Because I think, for like just say guys in general, I think the primary emotion is anger, right? And then you really don't know where that's coming from. Like it was days that, I would wake up and like not really know why I was just pissed off for no reason. Like, why am I just upset right now? But that was just my emotional, just my emotional state at the time. And then not really navigating that any kind of way. So to actually think about it, it's like, all right, well, something happened maybe like 2 days ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever it was that you really didn't deal with at that time. So it's stemming back up to where it's like, all right, let me walk through my emotional state through this to one, calm myself down and realize that if I just expressed myself at that point in time, I wouldn't be here right now feeling what I feel because I didn't deal with it then.
Mhm.
So, and that's a big thing. Like, it's okay to feel your emotions. So it's okay to be mad. It's okay to be angry. And then emotional intelligence, developing that helps you deal with those emotions in a positive way to where you're not lashing out at your significant other, not lashing out as a child, not lashing out at your boss, right? Because obviously, coworkers can get on your nerves. Like they're not always pleasant to be around. So,
very true.
Right. So now being able to navigate that, like, all right, let me take a step back. Obviously, this person may be going through something. Obviously, I may be going through something. Let me handle that the way I can handle that for myself. And I think that's the biggest part about emotional intelligence. Like, not only navigating your own emotions, but helping other people navigate theirs as well. Being empathy, being an empath to them for their benefit as well as your own.
Absolutely. I think that a big part of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. So in the
Oh
example
yeah,
that you gave in
yeah,
terms of being angry, again, it's okay to feel your emotions. And I believe that we're supposed to process it because like you said, it will
right.
resurface at some point.
At
If
some
it,
point, yep.
it will definitely, like a volcano, it's going to erupt at some time. But in terms of like the annoying coworkers, right? We all have them. I think everybody got at least one. Everybody,
At least one.
at
Right.
least one, right? But emotional intelligence comes into play when this one, like if you're already dealing with stuff, or say you're not, and then just one coworker like really pisses you off. Emotional intelligence steps in place of knowing not to respond right away. So like let's say it's an email,
Right.
and they do something that really pisses you off. Maybe they copy the supervisor and the way they made it seem, and it bothers you, right?
Yeah.
It's never smart to respond out of that emotion because you're responding emotionally instead of logically, right? Where it's never what you say, it's how you say it. You can still check that person in a professional way, whereas when you are emotional, you might be using F-bombs and being unprofessional. You just don't know. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, emotional intelligence is especially important in that regard because it allows you to control certain situations. Because as you mentioned earlier on, was we can't control anybody else. We can only control ourselves. That's the only person and thing we can control. Now, it ain't easy. I'm telling you, because I came a long way, but I still got some ways to go.
Right.
Not in denial, but work in progress. But I have learned to preserve my energy because I feel like when you allow people to disrupt your peace, you become infected, right? You become infected with that person's negativity. And while they may have done something to upset you, it is important to not just be like, whatever. If it made you feel away, you have to process it. And that's
process it. Yep.
Right. I've learned that because before I used to just bury it, whatever. And eventually it erupted to a crisis level. So anytime I'm feeling away, and sometimes I wake up and I don't know what my problem. I'm just not in a good mood. I don't want to be bothered. But I am unapologetically myself. If I know there's something, like one thing I could say is, I never go to work and take it out on anybody. I might just be really quiet because I'm trying to explore to see where this is coming from, right? But I would never go and lash out at somebody simply because I don't know what my problem is. But I do think that it's important for people to process whatever they're feeling because it's important, and you need to be, because that's why I don't stay mad, because I process it. I identify what my issue is. I can play it over and over in my head, how I could have handled it, how I should have handled it, what have you. But at the end of it, I allow it to be, because what you resist persists. If I keep resisting it, it's going to remain.
Right.
So if I process it and allow the anger or the sadness or whatever I'm feeling to flow, eventually it dissipates, goes away.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of how, like, and I said that, like I said earlier, like how I used to journal all the time. That's kind of what my journals would be about, especially if I found out I was upset about something. I would write it out, and then I would literally just have like an argument with myself, like, how is this going to end, right? Like, so it could be about anything. I would just write it out, or I would talk to it, like I would talk to myself about it, and then, I'm playing the back and forth of like, how is this argument? Does it help anything? Probably not, right? So if I address it, how can I address it in a respectful manner where both parties are going to be able to see eye to eye, right? Because I think that's the biggest part about emotional intelligence is that, like we stated earlier, you can have those emotions, right? You can express those in a way that's going to help the other person help you set up that boundary, right? Like you have that boundary. Look, I didn't like how you did that. I don't like, being addressed in that kind of way. Like from this point forward, how can we see eye to eye? How can we come in the middle and then navigate that further? Because especially in a work environment, like the relationships you have is kind of like the biggest things in our lives, especially since we're dealing with humans every day, no matter what type of profession that you have. How do you deal with them and be okay, one, to go into it authentically and be yourself without causing the drama and the reactions that we've been seeing so far. But so yeah, like having that emotional intelligence and having that back and forth with yourself to figure out where exactly it is that you're stemming from would help you navigate not only yourself but other people.
You know, I didn't want to just hear that last part, okay? So I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say this. Someone made me upset at work
Right.
maybe like a month and some change ago. I did not address it because I
Mhm.
knew that if I addressed it at that time, it was not going to come out right.
Okay.
So I do have to work with this person. So what I do, I just avoid. I avoid eye contact when the person is talking to me. I'm just like, but I'm still trying to remain professional. And
Right.
I do go back and forth with myself because one thing is I'm okay with being blunt and honest and telling you how I felt.
Hmm.
But I'm trying to determine whether that's going to be beneficial because the person may do it again because that's their personality.
Hmm.
Or do I just completely withdraw like I have been? And I deal with you solely on a professional level. Before we used to talk, laugh, and I would do extra stuff for the person. Now it's boom, 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 boom. It ain't no extra, ain't no kiki, ha, ha, ha. No, because you will not do that again. Because if you do that
Right.
again, it's going to be a little different ending to that. And it might result in me losing my job. So I feel like you said that for me to take that after we're off air, I'm actually going to look into that because I think that I heard that for a reason.
Well, I think people's relationships are different, right? So if you strictly only deal with this person at work and you want to keep it professional at that point, I mean that's obviously fine. That's beneficial for you, right? But if you were looking for something, or say if you had a more personal relationship with this person and they don't know why that stopped, right? To help them better understand, then I think that's something that needs to be more addressed. So if it's something like this, like you have people you work with that you just talk to at work, that's fine. But if you have somebody who you had a personal relationship with, then it may be something you want to address in a way that they can understand how you felt in that moment. Because I think a lot of people don't mean to be as, they don't mean to cross a boundary, right? They just don't know the boundary has been set. So if you can talk about that in a way that's going to both let them know what's up and then give them that opportunity to just like, all right, this is your boundary. I know what that is, and then abide by that. I think that's a benefit. That's more beneficial for you in terms of that relationship. Now, again, if you just talk to the person at work, it don't really matter to you. Cool, you just talk to them at work. But at the end of the day, if you want to, if it's something more personal to you and more so not just in work, then yeah, it'll be beneficial for you to take that time and say, hey, this is what happened at this point, and we just need to talk about it real quick because I had some feelings and some emotions that kind of sprung from that you may not have understood.
So I will say that the person is very aware because we had words, and the person did not like how I responded. But then you just don't do
Okay.
certain things. Again, there are boundaries. Maybe they were never set, but I think that in a professional setting, certain things just shouldn't occur. Um,
True.
so in that regard, it's kind of like so the person knows and they
Okay.
see my shift in my energy since then. Again, I don't give no eye contact. Good morning,
Mhm.
but I still do the work that needs to be done for this individual. But
Yeah.
the thing that I think plays on my heart is like, no, we're not friends outside of work, and we've text out every now and again outside of work, but it was really always work related. But this person did something really, really special for me,
Hmm.
and I appreciated it, and I still do, which is why I'm on the fence about talking to this person or not.
I see. Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because I'm the type of person that I don't take when people do stuff for me that really made a difference in my life. I don't take that for granted.
Hmm.
I genuinely appreciate certain people like that. And I think that's why my shock factor was like, hold up. Oh,
Right. Right.
what we doing? Like, but I still had to let it be known like I was dissatisfied with the way things went. So yeah, so I'm gonna get off my Oprah stuff, but I just think that I needed to hear I think I needed to hear that so I can explore whether I need to uh have a conversation. 'Cause I thought about it several times, asking if we can, but I'm like, 'cause even now to date, it's still like little things this person does. I'm like, like, so I don't know if it's even worth it,
Yeah,
But
I mean, I get that. hmm
I will say this: my emotional intelligence is very heightened.
Right.
When you know yourself, you have to move accordingly because I'm not going to let that person take me out of character or destroy. Because that day I was pissed. And when you let someone else control your emotions, you've lost control. No one
hmm
should ever, and it's easy to say, it's very easy to say to not let people control your emotions. Some days I do, some days I don't. There were times people would like flip me off on a highway and I would like laugh at them like whatever. And the other times I'm like, what? What? I'm gonna chase you what? Like, so you just have to be careful with allowing people to change your emotional state.
Right.
But emotional intelligence, I don't think people really give it the credit that it deserves because it really has the power to change everything, your mood, your energy, your mindset. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's a lot
Yeah.
that encompasses from that.
Yeah. I think my emotional intelligence is really, like you said earlier, is mainly about mental awareness, right? So
Yeah.
having that mental awareness to just navigate your own life, right? Navigate whatever it is that you're going through is a big key to one creating more mentally resilient type mind to where you're
Yeah.
not and I want to specify this too. Like it's very difficult to almost impossible to control your emotions. But having the emotional intelligence allows you to be able to navigate them. So, like I said earlier, like you're going to feel whatever it is that you're feeling. Like you're going to feel whatever it is that you're feeling in that moment. But if you don't have that intelligence to really understand it, to then uh, show it in a better light than you just reacting just nilly willy, then it is going to cause you problems. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes people get confused, like having emotional intelligence is not having really emotions, like you don't really feel anything. And I don't
Right.
think that's not the case. That's just a myth that's put out there to where you just having emotional intelligence is not you not you not feeling the emotion, but you being able to understand them and then present
I
them
know.
in a better light towards other people.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree with that. I agree with that because before I actually came to where we work now, I used to be a very reactional person. Like
hmm
Barry, I didn't care if he was the boss. I didn't care if he was the mayor. I didn't care if he was the janitor. Like,
Right.
and I'm still that way. Like, and you know me. I'm always nice to people. I'm pleasant. I speak to everybody, no
hmm
matter if they're the top or the bottom. That's just my personality because I feel like we're all people,
Right.
and you don't need to look down your nose on certain people because of what they're doing to survive on earth. It's
Right.
not that deep.
Right.
But there was this one boss in particular I couldn't stand. Well, I could stand her at one point. Like we were friends. We
hmm
were friends. I like shared my food with this person. Like we were friends, right? She was running for the top spot, and like me and another coworker, we was supporting her. We was like, "Yeah, you deserve it. You can do it. You can do it." Pumping her up, right? Soon as she got it, she turned into a complete different person, and she started being very malicious, right?
Oh, okay. hmm
And I don't take well to that because when I know intentionally trying to do something, like I don't like bullies. You're not going to bully me, and that's what I felt like she was trying to do because she was in charge. But really, little do you know, I don't give a good about you being in charge. I'm a woman, you're
Right.
a woman, and we're gonna talk respectfully, right? So where am I going with this? Reaction. Okay, so do we get back in line? Okay, so every time she would do something, I would react, even if it was in an email. I didn't care what I put in the email because who you talking to, right?
Right.
And there was another coworker who was an investigator, older lady. I was really close to her, And I would go in her office and be like, do you know what this just did? And she just looking at, she'd be like, Mama, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, what you mean? What you
Right.
mean? She talking to
Right.
me. And this is something that always stays with me and remains to this moment. And this was what, 9-10 years ago.
Mhm.
It was like, you have to, basically, I'm not going to try to I'm gonna paraphrase. So basically she was telling me I have to stop responding like that because it's not
Yeah.
going to get me anywhere. And then I understood the definition of insanity is to continually do the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result.
Mhm.
Right. So because I was like blacklisted, because I was the person that wasn't taking nobody's crap, I knew that I need to get out of there. But in order for me to move beyond that space, I had to become emotionally intelligent. I had to now begin playing politics, right? So that means I could respond to you, but I'm gonna respond to you in a way that's going to be conducive to me.
Right.
Not because when somebody's yelling and the person you yell back, that's an expectation of them. But
Yep.
when you're calm or you laugh at them, that makes them like, what? That makes them even madder. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so you really have the upper hand. But I didn't elevate. I said all that to say I didn't elevate from that space until I became aware and cognizant of my reactions. I had to learn to
Right.
be I had to learn to what's the word I'm looking for? Be in control. Like I needed to learn self-control. That's what I was looking for. And I
Mhm.
didn't have that at the time. And the doors that God was going to start allowing me to go through, I needed to be able to check myself, which is
Right.
why I've gotten promoted several times where we are. Because I now understood my vulnerabilities. I understood the fact that I need to think before I react because I was
Mhm.
reactional. Like you give it to me, I'm gonna give it to you. Now it's like
Right. Right.
I'll think. I'm still gonna give it to you, but I'll think first. You
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
the greater when you have greater self-awareness, it really makes a difference in a lot of things in your life. It really kind of keeps away a lot of negativity because you're filtering it. You're
Right.
conscious, so you're filtering it out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's kind of the difference between being aggressive and being assertive. Like some people try to make them synonyms and they're not. Like they're not the same, right? Being assertive is definitely different than being just aggressive, and that's
yeah,
kind of where you're getting that reactionary state from. A lot of people who react are just aggressive; they're not really thinking anything through. To where when you're assertive, is you can make that line and be like, okay, this is where that's going to stop, and we're going to dead that right here, and then we're going to talk about what's going on. And I think that's the biggest key.
that is so true. That is so true. So because there's so much positivity with having emotional intelligence, are there any downsides that you think to having emotional intelligence?
No, there aren't really any downsides to having emotional intelligence. I think there can be downsides to how people would try to incorporate it into their lives, only because they really don't know what it is. And like I said before, like a lot of people think, hey, like, having emotional intelligence is controlling your emotions, which is never going to happen. And then when they can't, they get disheartened, and then they won't continue that process, right? Because they can't really. They're like, oh well, I'm supposed to be better in myself in terms of emotional intelligence, but I'm still having all these emotions, and it's not going away. But that's not what it is. Like
Right.
just having is just an understanding of it, and then you're always going to have them. There's never going to be a point in time to where even if you only feel anger, you're going is an emotional state, right? So understanding that point, I think, is one of the bigger ones when trying to develop something like emotional intelligence. To know it's not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult because you have to go within yourself to actually find these things. And
Yeah.
then being authentic and honest about yourself, about the process. So between those three things, I think a lot of people struggle with trying to develop it, but understanding that it's going to be an ongoing process is an everyday kind of thing to where you have to look within yourself. I
Yeah.
think most people be all right once they figure that out.
Yeah. I think the hardest part is getting to that point where you now realize there's an issue and you start to do the work on yourself. Because it took
Right,
me three
right.
years, like 3 years, like I literally got broken down to like infancy, right? Like
Hmm.
I really needed because I had so much that I was carrying that wasn't mine.
Right.
And I needed to identify what those things were. I needed to understand how to rid them. I needed to understand that it wasn't my fault. I needed to be kind to myself. I needed
Hmm.
to give myself grace and give myself time to become who I was destined to be. But in order for me to get to that point, I needed to go through the reconstruction phase.
Right.
So, as you said, it is not going to be easy. Nothing in life worth having ever is. It's a process. Like you
It is a
said,
process. Yeah.
process. I'm still in it. I'm not
Right.
going through the stuff, but I still have to actively participate in making sure that I am processing my emotions. I am processing the things that I see and deal with or hear or what have you. You know, this
Hmm.
whole mental health advocacy, I speak to a lot of people, you know, behind the scenes, and there's a lot of things that are troubling. And because I'm an empath, I can feel it. And you know, sometimes that's why I think sometimes I just have to withdraw for like a day or two. I don't answer calls. I don't really respond to text messages. I come home
Hmm.
and just be by myself because I
Right.
need to replenish, because it takes a lot out of you when you're giving to people and you're allowing them to be vulnerable with you. I
Right.
wouldn't change it for anything, but I still have to make sure that I'm refilling my cup because I'll get drained,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
100%.
yeah, so I will say before we go, before we wrap it up, I did write down three things that I thought that could possibly be a downside to emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Um, so I was doing research, and research has found that people who have um, emotional intelligence sometimes use it for manipulation or deceptive purposes. And that could be so
Okay.
depending on the character, right?
Yeah. And I can see that point, but like when I look at emotional intelligence, that's kind of like, um, I think that's kind of difference between being an empathic person to understand somebody else's emotions
Yeah.
and understanding within yourself, right? So yeah, I can see where that can stem from. I don't personally believe that a person who is actively practicing emotional intelligence would use it for the manipulative factor of making somebody else emotional. You see what I'm saying?
What
Um,
about, go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, so yeah, so like with that, I can kind of see where that stems from, but you know, only positivity over here, so I don't know nothing about
Oh,
that.
that's right. Yeah. Positivity. But what about the people who aren't actively participating? What about the people that were born with it? Can you see it from that angle? That people who are naturally born that way using, because if you think about it, there's people who see, I want to give this example, but I don't, because I don't want it to, because this is like a perfect example. But just sometimes people use certain, for example, like a person who's good with money, right?
Okay.
They become a banker and they know how to now, like they're smart, they're emotionally intelligent. Well, that's different because that's self-awareness, reacting. Okay, yeah, never mind. I'm going too deep. Just scratch that one. Scratch that one. Hey, whatever. I'm gonna go to number two.
Okay.
Uh, so highly emotionally intelligent people may have a hard time delivering negative feedback out of fear for hurting someone's feelings. Can you see that one?
Yes. Yeah, and especially because you can understand where the feeling may be coming from. So yeah, I can see that in terms of a leadership standpoint, that you may not want to give the negative feedback or criticism that you think the person may need. But again, like if you're doing that in terms of bettering yourself, there's a way to go about it, and I think this is part of the emotional intelligence journey, to where instead of just giving criticism,
Mhm.
you have those people that's all they do, right? They just give you criticism. They really don't know how to make it constructive whatsoever. And developing that emotional intelligence to understand what a person may be feeling, to then make the criticism not so judgy and make it more constructive, is, I think, a benefit. So for it to be a negative aspect is like you just don't want to do it at all, and that may just not. Then it may just be something that a person who's in leadership is just not used to. So, yeah, I guess that can be a negative, but I think for the most part, developing emotional intelligence to be able to give constructive criticism is actually more beneficial to have that in your repertoire.
So do you repertoire, your vocabulary, be love. So do you think that creating a balance would help with that? Because if you can give somebody constructive criticism, but also kind of give them more positive feedback. Like if they mess something up, you can be like, you whatever, however you explain it, but you did do good with analyzing it and the way you structured it. I think that sometimes creating a balance will also, excuse me, not also, but will aid in softening the blow.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like you just daggers at them. You're telling them like, listen, did you mess this up? But you did do good in this regard. Like, you know what I mean? So I think creating the balance.
Yeah, and I think that's where the constructive part comes into it, because that's more so the balance. It's like, all right, yeah, it's like, so say if like you're a person that's in charge of a project, right? It's like, okay, yeah, you got the project, you managed it. These are some things that you did very well, and then these are some things that we may be able to help you develop or work on to make your next overhaul project be outstanding. So the balance definitely helps.
Amen. Be love. I'm gonna call you that tomorrow when I see you.
Don't do it. I'm
gonna yell in the hallway like, "Hey, be love!" And one more. So research also suggested that people with high emotional intelligence may actually be less creative and innovative.
Really?
They made that connection. Yeah, like I was trying to sort through it in my mind, but I think that because having, thinking before you react, being self-aware, being non-reactive, I think that I don't know, like I haven't been able to really make sense of that in my mind. So what do you think?
I mean, the only thing I can think of in terms of that is more so as like an overthinker. Right. So you can be emotionally intelligent, but you can be an overthinker. I tend to be an overthinker sometimes myself, and I just think for a person who is struggling creatively, that may be the correlation. Like other than that, I really can't see where else that will correlate in terms of, having the emotional intelligence, is that you don't really, balance the overthinking standpoint within yourself. So, or maybe so you're constantly thinking about others' emotional state as opposed to your own. And so maybe that point, but yeah, that's interesting. I would have never put those two together.
Yeah. And I think as I hear you dissecting that, I think that in terms of putting other people's emotions over your own could kind of fall underneath the being less innovative or creative, because if you come up, let's say you're partnered with somebody at work and you come up with something, but you know that this person that you work with is like has a jealous spirit or has low self-esteem in terms of their workload. So is it more so like you're not going to be innovative or creative because you care about the next person's feelings and or emotions?
Yeah, I think that might be part of it. Yeah, I don't really know what else there really could be in terms of, that correlation between emotional intelligence and innovation. Unless if they are considering like persons who are innovating typically only think about what it is that they're creating as opposed to the emotional standpoint of it. Because, people tend to think that you have to be passionate and you have to be immersed in what you're doing to be creative. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think it does make for great creative and innovative type work, but I don't think that's necessary in terms of being creative or innovative in a sense. So Yeah, I guess there is some type of correlation there. I would have to think about it more to basically pin it down, pin it down on what they're actually talking about.
So basically, 1 out of 3 seems.
Well, I mean, that's, this is all my opinion. I'm not like a professional at all at this, but just thinking about psychology in general, just thinking about emotional intelligence, mental health, and then correlating those, it'll be, like I said, this is all positive to me. It's all creating a resilient mind, a more mental health mind, and helping people with like their daily stresses in life. Like obviously, if you are struggling deeply, you seek professional help with that. Like
Right.
and I think that's the bigger key. But understanding just your emotional state would help people even reach that aspect of it. Like I definitely need to seek help. So where this might not be something they thought about without having to think about those other options.
Right. Whew, I agree. I mean, you gave a whole host of information and good info, and but how we tie the emotional intelligence into mental health. I'm gonna say what I think, and then I want you to say what you think, and then we'll like kind of like close it out.
Okay.
For me, as a mental health advocate, I understand the importance of self-care, reflection, self-perseverance. I understand the importance of allowing yourself to feel what you feel. One thing is, anytime somebody tells me something about their feelings, I will never, ever, ever dumb that down. And I let them know you are entitled to your feelings. So if you're feeling away, you're entitled to that. But if I don't agree with the way I think that you are feeling behind it, I'll give you a different perspective as someone on the outside looking in, because we all have different minds, right? So
Right.
if two friends are talking and the one person hurt the other person's feelings, and they sometimes I can be like, well, maybe I can give them a different, for instance, that'll also lessen that emotion that they're feeling, right?
Right.
So for me to tie in emotional intelligence with mental health, I think that it has a lot to do with preserving your mental peace, your happiness, and just making sure that you are practicing emotional intelligence in an effort to not what's the word I'm looking for, in an effort to not, I can't think of a word, but to not bring yourself down,
Okay.
because if you're not if you're not dealing with yourself and the things that happens in life, even if nothing happened to you as a child, if there's things going on in your adult life and you're not adequately processing these things,
Right.
you don't have emotional intelligence. At some point, you're just going to keep on piling, and then your mental health now will be at stake, because you're just you're not authentic. You're not lightweighted. You're heavy.
Right.
So for me, that's where the connections, I feel like they're like brother and sister.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and I agree I agree with all that, and like for the correlation between the two for me is more so that to do anything well, you have to figure out where you need to go, right? So for somebody who is trying to develop their mental health, like for anybody that's struggling with something, you have to become mentally aware, and to become mentally aware, having the emotional intelligence to do so, I think is important. I think that's the starting point. So when people talk about mental health, besides just talking to somebody about what you're going through, having that emotional intelligence, I think is the starting point to help you navigate the process. Really, like the process is ongoing. There's always going to be stressors. There's always going to be something going on. There's always going to be somebody you're dealing with that has anxiety, or somebody that's more reserved and doesn't like to come out their shell. So you're trying to navigate them through that, or if you have kids. So like emotional intelligence in terms of mental health regarding not only yourself, but everybody around you. I think that's the bigger correlation for me, and why it's important that if we can get somebody to develop it, right? If we can get somebody to actually explore their own mental state, to then become more of an empath for somebody else, to actually understand what somebody else is going through, that helps a lot of different people. Right. And that goes across the lines of like, oh yeah, I talked to this person, they really understood where I was coming from. And then that kind of made me see that what I may be dealing with may not be as bad as somebody else, right? So I think it all is all connected in a sense of mental health, and I think mental health is the biggest picture in terms of navigating your life and having to navigate a life full of other people.
Yeah. I agree. I think mental health is the umbrella, and emotional intelligence falls underneath that.
Underneath it, yeah.
It correlates with mental health. So,
right.
I do. I mean, you've been amazing. Like, just
thank you.
You're welcome. Now you have to buy me coffee tomorrow, okay?
Oh, Jesus.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm gonna buy you coffee or tea. You be drinking tea, not coffee. So
no, I do. I do a bit of both, but
we'll worry about that tomorrow when I call your name. Be love in the hallways. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out.
All right.
Is there any parting information that you would like to say to the viewers?
Parting information?
Yeah, like last words. Like Jerry Springer had final thoughts.
Oh, no, I mean, my only final thought would be that if somebody's like watching or listening to this, that they get some type of inspiration in that every day is a process, right? There is no taking away from that, right? You can't you can't navigate around it. You have to go through the process to get to actually where you want to be. So that coming from, people who have struggled and had their own issues and had their own desires that they may not been able to achieve. Just developing that mindset for yourself and the overall just mental health aspect of it to then not only better yourself, but, better the lives of those around you, I think is most important for me.
Absolutely. Amen, brother. Brother Harris. I gave you like 3 different names.
Right. Call me all different types of stuff.
Just to piggyback a little off of what you just said, it is extremely, tending to your mental health is extremely important. And also, like you said, it is a process. It's an ongoing, relentless process.
Ongoing.
But you're going to be, and people have to understand that you're going to be tested. That also attests to how far you've come. Because if you started the process and you're a year and a half in and you're still responding the way you did when you begun the process, you need to reevaluate some things because you're not where you should be in a year and a half. Now, there's no particular order you should be in, but I just think that in a year and a half's time, you've had 365 days in that first year and then 100 and some odd days in the half year that you're practicing this thing, and you really should be further, even if it's a little bit. Give yourself credit for a little change, but you really should not be in the same space that you were when you begun this journey. So I want people to understand that it is okay not to be okay, but what's not okay is to remain in a negative space that's traumatized, has trauma attached to it. If you have PTSD, things of this nature, you really have to, or you should begin to start to unveil and uncover these things, because mental health applies to all of us, and we all feel it to some degree, whether it's directly or indirectly. We all, are commingled. So hopefully people hear this, see this, and even if it's not for them, if they, can share this information with someone else, that would be great. Because again, when you know better, you do better, and the more you go through things, the wiser you become. And I just really want everyone to be in a very genuine space and to let go of the things that, not let it go, but deal with the things that has put you in a space that you don't need to be in, or that's no longer conducive to where you're trying to go. So that said, I freaking thank you, Mr. Harrison.
You are welcome.
I've been waiting for this.
This is fun. Yeah.
It is. Like, and I actually want to have it, especially because, well, again, I told you articulate very well. But I do value your insight, not only as a person, but also as a psychology major. So there's other situations relating to mental health that I want to explore. But I definitely do want to have you on again in the very, very near future.
Okay. Yeah, that works.
Good. All right. Well, thank you for coming and blessing us with your knowledge. It was great having you.
Very much appreciated. Thanks for inviting me.